Welcome to Bodacious Estate Conversations, the podcast where we skip the polite small talk and get straight to the real story about handling a loved one's property. From unexpected challenges to the messy emotions nobody warns you about, I bring you unfiltered stories, practical advice, and clever shortcuts from people who've been there and the professionals who know the way. If you want honest answers, bold strategies, and the confidence to take control, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Kasey King.
Thanks for tuning in. On today's episode of Bodacious Estate Conversations, I'm excited to chat with an equestrian triathlete competitor and half Ironman finisher with 20 years experience, estate planning expert, and partner with FPSP law firm. In her spare time, she impressively reads between 3 to 4 books a week, loves hiking with her dog and horseback riding, a woman after my own heart. Let's give a warm welcome to Carrie Pugh. Thrilled to have you on Bodacious Estate Conversations, Carrie.
Thanks for having me, Kasey. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. It's going to be amazing. So today we're diving into estate planning, the surprises families face, and how to protect what matters most. Stick around until the end to hear her number one tip for avoiding costly mistakes. So, Carrie, let's just dig right into it. What makes your firm stand out from the others?
So, we are a full service law firm. We have 4 partners in our firm with a combined total of hundreds of years experience. We have experts in all areas of law, include everything from criminal law to litigation to business law to family law. And then myself, who my primary focus is estate planning and administration. So we really can cover all of your family's needs. And in particular, my area is estate planning and administration.
So, your philosophy is to guide folks through all stages of life. So, what does a typical client look like for you?
So a typical client for me could be anyone from someone who I've worked with on the family law side, through a transition in their life, a divorce or a custody matter, or just someone who knows that they need estate planning but doesn't know where to start. My goal is to help those clients throughout all of life transitions, and then through death with their family to make sure that everything is taken care of, that their assets are protected, that their family doesn't struggle, upon their death, because it's something we all face, and just to make sure that they have all of the legal advice they need in one place.
I love that. So, you really pride yourself on giving folks that personal touch. So, when somebody comes in for your assistance and your help and guidance, what does that look like for them?
Right. So we do free consultations for estate planning. So a lot of people come to us because someone has said to them, you should have a will, or you need to make sure that your family's taken care of. And most people don't know what that means. There's a lot of estate planning documents. It's not just as simple as having a will. I mean, a will doesn't do anything for you while you're here. So there are a lot of other estate planning documents that can help make sure that you're able to maintain your independence, maintain your assets, plan for the future, plan for your children. So there's a lot more to estate planning than just having a will. And I always caution people to not listen to advice, from those who don't really know what you need, but to have a conversation with someone who's an expert in the field so they can analyze your unique situation and make sure that you and your family are covered the way they should be.
Yeah, it is kind of funny when you think about it, So in my field, I always have dads, right? Like I love dads. Dads always know what's best for the house. And I'm always like, oh, well, let's talk to an inspector. But from your perspective, it's probably neighbors, right?
Neighbors, their friends, over drinks, someone at a soccer game, I've heard all stories. My friend told me over beer that I need to do this, or, I heard from my best friend's, cousin that I need a trust. And, they may be on the right track, but everybody has a different situation and all state laws are different. So if you take advice from someone in a different state, it may be completely off base from what you need in Pennsylvania, because each state does have unique laws when it comes to estate planning, when it comes to administration, when it comes to the costs of healthcare. So you really need to make sure you're talking to someone who's an expert and can analyze everything and make sure you're doing what's right for you.
Yeah, I truly believe everybody's scenario is going to be different, right? Like maybe there's a special needs child. Well, that's going to be a little different with how things are set up.
Right.
Yeah, so cool. So, what is one of the most common mistakes that people make when they think they can do this their own on like one of the online, I don't know, is there like a Zoom attorney or something that they can do online?
Right, yes, LegalZoom is the free website, and the problem with LegalZoom is that there's a ton of information there, but it's not all correct. It's not you don't have a face-to-face with an attorney. So I say the biggest mistake people make is assuming that they just need one document. I mean, when people think of estate planning, they think about wills. Wills don't do anything for you while you're here. They don't necessarily help you avoid costly administrative costs. So there's a lot more to it. You want to make sure that you're protected and planning both for during your lifetime as well as after your lifetime. So I think assuming that number one, you can just pull something off the internet and it's going to comply with state law or fit your needs, that's probably the biggest thing. And the second one is assuming that you just need one document because that worked for your neighbor.
I think that's so huge and important to and why you should talk to somebody specifically about your unique situation and what you have and what assets you want to protect. Yeah, I love that. So if somebody wanted to get a trust, so for me, like I'd want to protect my assets so that if anything happened to myself or my husband, the other person would be protected. And this is so funny because we just said that you'd have to know like everything about our individual case, but just like a general topic. If you still had a mortgage on your home, so you didn't have the deed outright, there was still a mortgage involved that had to be paid off, could you still put the home in a trust?
You can, yeah. There are only certain types, though. There are several different types of trusts. Not every trust is the same, and certain types you can do that with, certain types you can't. So again, we'd have to have that conversation. First of all, what are your goals? Second of all, what assets do you have? Third of all, what type of a document, what type of trust is the best for your unique situation? Because there are so many different types, so many different goals that people have. Some work for some people, some work for different, don't work for others. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is maybe it depends. It's kind of like that's everything in the law. It depends. Sometimes it's the answer is yes, sometimes it's no, but it depends on the circumstances. Everyone's unique, so I truly believe there's not a one size fits all. What works again for your neighbor may not work for you, may not work for your parents, and it's really also about the stage of life that you're in. Whether you're young and have a long life expectancy ahead of you, whether you're facing illness, whether you're older. You mentioned special needs children, who your beneficiaries are going to be. Do you need to plan for more than just yourself, or is that enough? So there's a lot of different facts that go into making that decision. And it's really a conversation, and it can change throughout your life. So you want to make sure that you don't just do a will, stick it in a drawer and never look at it, or do a trust and never re-examine it. So there are a lot of things I think that go into that relationship building. And my goal is to have a relationship with my clients so that if something changes in their lives, they're comfortable calling and saying, hey, I need to talk about this, and not worrying, that, their attorney will not be available or that they won't be able to get a meeting or that sort of thing. So I think having that relationship is really important, and that comfort level that if you have a question, you ask it, because it's important to make sure that everything is working the way you want it to.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wanted to plan for the future, let's say I want to plan to make sure that my estate doesn't go into probate. Like I want to have everything pre-planned so that everybody out there listening understands when something goes into probate. Can you define why it goes into probate and how to avoid that happening after death?
Sure. So probate varies state to state. In Pennsylvania, probate is not a bad word. Probate is simply a process of getting your estate finalized through the court system. And there are certain types of estates that require that court involvement, and there are certain types of estates that don't. If you have a will, one of the misconceptions people has is if I have a will, I won't have to go through probate. That's absolutely inaccurate. A will has to go through probate. And if you die without anything at all, that has to go through probate as well. So while you may avoid probate, you may not avoid the time that's involved in administering a estate just because you have a trust. So there are things, to consider there. Maybe probate isn't a bad word for your family. Maybe there is not a reason to avoid it. So avoiding probate is not necessarily the best solution in every circumstance, and it's not necessarily a bad word. A lot of people listen to some podcasts from international speakers on estate planning, and they say you absolutely want to avoid probate. If you're living in California, I would say yes, we absolutely want to avoid probate. Probate in California is not something anyone wants to go through. Pennsylvania, it's a little bit less stringent. I mean, and there's still a process and there's still fees involved, but it's not necessarily something that everybody should avoid or should want to avoid. Now, all owning properties in multiple states is another really good reason to avoid probate, because if you own properties in multiple states, you're going to have to go through probate in multiple states. But again, it goes back to what assets do you have? What are your goals as to avoiding probate is a good idea or not necessary.
Yep. I love that. Just another reason to have your local attorney review.
Right. Have that conversation, come into the meeting, willing to share everything. I mean, we need to know what assets you have, what deep, dark family secrets you have to anticipate problems that might come down the line. And again, blended families look different than intact families. Special needs children are different than children who do not have special needs. There's a lot of different things that go into that planning process.
So, Carrie, where did you get this passion? Like, I can tell as you're talking about this, you're very passionate about it. Where did that come from?
So I spent the first about 15 years of my career doing mostly family law. I mean, I dabbled in estate planning, I dabbled in some other things, but family law was really my main focus. Unfortunately, family law is extremely stressful, and I do still do family law. I still think it's very important, but it's very stressful. So 6 years ago, I actually had a major medical event that really kind of changed my perspective, changed my outlook, and changed my career focus. I had a massive stroke 6 years ago. I ended up in the ICU at York Hospital in surgery and really was in not great shape for a short period of time. At that time, shame on me, even though I'm an attorney and I know better, I had no estate planning documents in place for myself. I didn't have a power of attorney. I didn't have a medical directive. I didn't have a will. So if things had turned out differently, my family would have been faced with a really, really challenging situation in having to probably go to court to get guardianship of me to make decisions. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but it really made me take a step back and say, wait a minute, if I, as an attorney who knows better, don't have these documents in place, what about people who really just don't have that background? And it's so important to plan for that, because life can change in an instant. You could have a car accident, you could have a stroke, you could find yourself, in a situation that you're not able to make decisions for yourself. And not having those documents in place can really put a huge burden on your family. So that made me kind of reassess and think about the fact that estate planning really just isn't for the elderly. It's not just for people who are sick. It's really for anybody. And it's really important to have those in place. So that's kind of where my passion came from personal experience. The other side of that is that my grandmother had really, really good estate planning documents in place when she became ill and then ultimately passed away. So seeing the fact that she had great documents in place and how that positively impacted our family is another reason why I kind of decided to head in this direction.
Were you really close to your grandmother growing up?
I would say not as close. She lived in a different state. We were close in that, we saw each other on every holiday. I spent time with her in the summers when I was a kid. So not as close. And we honestly, as a family, didn't really know that she had these really good documents in place until we needed to use them. The biggest thing was her healthcare directive, because she ended up having actually a series of strokes and was incapacitated. And my mother was her healthcare power of attorney agent. And those documents were so clear that my mother was able to, fulfill my grandmother's wishes, even though she was emotional and it was a horrible time. But without having those in writing and having those in place and ultimately knowing what my grandmother would have wanted, it would have made the decision making so hard on her. It was hard anyway. It's always hard. But by having a clear plan, you can look at those documents and say, you know what? My mom went to the time and effort to write this down. I know what she really wants. And it makes the decision making in really hard scenarios so much easier for the family.
Yeah. Oh, man. It's funny. I thought when I got married that I could make decisions for my husband. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with you that I realized, oh, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, Pennsylvania, it's different. Medical decisions and legal decisions are two separate areas. Legal decisions, technically, there's a statute in Pennsylvania that says next of kin can make medical decisions, but that can be tricky too, because, what if you're not married? What if you're a widow and have 4 kids? Well, if you're a widow and have 4 kids, guess who your next of kin is? It's all 4 of your children. And I have 4 brothers and we never get along on anything. We never agree on anything. I can't imagine if the 5 of us were thrown into a situation where we together as a conglomerate had to make those decisions and agree on everything. You always hope that your family is going to agree when it comes down to it, but that's unfortunately not always the case. And by having a clear plan, having it in writing, having your wishes articulated in that manner, you can avoid the stress on your family, the emotional impact on your family. And I've seen, these things tear families apart. And you never expect that to happen, but you can plan for it. You can avoid those things. And the best way to do that is to have a clear plan in place.
Yep, totally agree with that. So, when you were growing up, did you always know that you wanted to be an attorney?
Absolutely not. So I actually went to undergraduate to be a vet. I have a degree in animal science from Penn State, and I have a minor in equine science, horse science. It wasn't until I was in college and realized that the science just wasn't for me. Even though I graduated with those degrees, I realized the science just wasn't for me. And I actually did an internship in Washington, D.C., and one of my professors there, we were actually on his sailboat. He had a sailboat and took the whole class out sailing one day. And I was one of the few who wasn't motion sick that day, couldn't get seasick. And so he and I had a lot of good conversations. And he said, what are you doing when you graduate? And I said, well, I always thought I'd go to veterinary school. And he's like, well, is that really you really want? And I said, I don't know. And he's like, from our conversations, he's like, you should consider law school. He's like, you would be such a good attorney, with your background. And that was really the turning point, what made me change my focus. And while I love animals and I have a lot of them, and I love that background, I think that I'm better placed than I would have been as a veterinarian.
Yeah, vets have it tough. Not that attorneys don't, but it's hard to see so much.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. My dog has been going through health issues over the last year, and I just see, the decisions that veterinarians have to make, and they're hard. Not attorneys don't have no hard decisions to make, but I think that I'm good at what I do. I enjoy what I do, and I think that it was fate that day that I didn't have motion sickness, and my professor was able to have that conversation with me.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So you do have a horse of your own, though, right?
I do. Yeah, I have one right now. I've had horses pretty much my entire life since I was 11. I got my first horse. Managed to keep horses through college and law school, which a lot of people don't. So now I have one that I've had for, I guess I've had him for 14 years now. So yeah, that's my happy place, on my horse out in the woods, my dog running alongside. That's kind of, that's my happy place. That's where I relax and think and solve my life problems is on the back of my horse. So
Yep, good for you. I love that so much. So this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. Do you have any events coming up?
So I'm actually speaking at the Forum for a Cure, which is an event that is organized by the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. It's coming up in November in York, and it's in conjunction with their other event that weekend, which is basically a cocktail hour for raising funds for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's. So I'll be speaking at the Forum for a Cure, which is a forum for caretakers for those that are suffering from Parkinson's. I spoke last year, and it was a wonderful event, just talking about some of the planning strategies that families should consider when they're faced with a diagnosis like Parkinson's. So that's coming up in November, that I'll be speaking at that.
Very cool. Yeah, so we can put some more information in the show notes where folks, yeah, can go for that. Very cool. So if anybody wanted to schedule an appointment with you to talk about how to properly set up their estate or just what they need to in place for that, where could they find you?
The best place is to call our office. We also have an option from our website that you can schedule an appointment online. So I do offer free consultations for estate planning, no obligation to move forward. It can be either by phone or by Zoom or in person, whatever fits your schedule. A lot of people like the phone and Zoom options for the first meeting, so that we can just have a conversation. And yeah, we'll sit down and talk. I usually ask for some information ahead of time. Nothing crazy. I don't need numbers of your bank accounts and that sort of thing. Just a general picture, an overview of your family and your assets. But then we can have that conversation and really dive in and decide what's best for you and how to move forward from there.
Well, okay. So we promised a number one tip before we conclude today's episode. So for everybody listening out there, what is your number one tip for folks?
My number one tip is plan before you need it. It's not an easy conversation to have. It's not easy to think about our demise. But in terms of estate planning, that's not really, in my mind, the biggest benefit is how can your estate plan affect you while you're alive? How can you plan for if you become incapacitated, if you become ill? How can you protect your family both now and, after you pass away? So planning before you need it, I think is the biggest thing I can say, because some strategies don't work unless you plan well ahead. And by having that conversation now, it makes it so much easier to plan for that future. The other thing I would say is that everybody needs some sort of an estate plan, whether it's an 18-year-old going off to college for the first time who just needs a POA, or whether it's someone who just got married, wants to make sure their spouse can take care of them, or whether it's someone who's going through a divorce and needs to modify their estate plan to reflect the fact they no longer want their spouse to that person in charge. I think everybody over the age of 18 should have a conversation with someone, an expert in estate planning, to figure out what's best for them so you can plan ahead for the future.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier, I just assumed being married meant that I could make decisions if my husband was ever incapacitated, and that's not true. He has bank accounts in his own name, and I have bank accounts in my own name. And if anything happened to one of us, that would be a problem. The other wouldn't have access.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that assumption. Most people assume, and without asking the questions, you're not going to necessarily get the right answers. And I don't recommend relying on the internet as your main source of information. There's wonderful information out there, but there's a lot of false information, or information that's applicable only in certain scenarios, or information that's state specific. So unless you have a conversation with an attorney who's an expert in that field in the state you live in, you're not going to get necessarily the right answers, or you're going to have a hard time finding them.
Yeah, agree. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. I really appreciate you being here. So, with that being said, that wraps up another episode of Bodacious Estate Conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with more great stories and tips soon.
Thanks so much, Kasey. It was wonderful being here.
See?
Bodacious Estate Conversations isn't just chatter, it's about learning, taking action, and finding solutions that actually work. If today's episode resonated, share your thoughts, subscribe, leave a review, and pass it along to someone who could use a hand. More stories, smart strategies, and practical guidance are coming in the next episode. Don't miss it.